Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the sun-bleached heart of Iran, where the desert doesn't just burn your skin, it tries to bake your thoughts. You trudge through the dust-heavy streets of Yazd, an ancient city nestled between mountain ranges and dry plains, the kind of place where shoes melt if you stand still too long. The air hums with the scent of clay, warm wind, and something faintly metallic like a furnace wrapped in silk. Every stone wall radiates heat like it holds grudges against the sun, and you're already questioning your life choices for coming here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop a comment with your city and local time. I always love seeing where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk past a crumbling mud brick gate and find yourself in a narrow alleyway. It curves like a dried-up riverbed, guiding you into a maze of sand-colored homes, stacked like sun-baked cake layers. The shadows here are sharp and narrow, flickering against arched doorways as you pass. Every now and then, a breeze drifts through and you blink, surprised that it's not boiling. It's single quotes. S. ... Cool. Not a sea-level chill, but surprisingly gentle, like someone whispering against your cheek. It makes no sense. The sun still scorches above, and yet here, in this sleepy alley, you're feeling oddly refreshed. Then you hear it, the soft creak of a wooden door. A man in flowing linen waves you in, beckoning from inside a tall adobe house, with turquoise tiles peeking through the dust. You hesitate for just a second because honestly, you weren't planning to get adopted by a 13th century nobleman today, but the promise of shade wins. You step inside ... and everything changes. The air hugs your skin like a silk sheet soaked in moonlight. There's no fan, no worry machines, just silence.com, and this otherworldly cool that makes you think. Did I just walk into a magic spell? Nope, just Persian engineering. You follow your linen-clad host through a corridor lit by soft golden slants of filtered sunlight, the kind that slips between carved wooden lattice screens and dances gently on the clay-tiled floor. The temperature inside feels almost luxurious, like the house is politely ignoring the hellfire just outside its walls. Your host chuckles when you pause in amazement near the doorway, wiping sweat from your brow with the back of your sleeve. It's not magic, he says in a tone that suggests it sort of is, and he motions for you to continue deeper into the home. The hallway leads you into a domed room where the air gets even cooler, as if each step peels away a layer of the desert's grip. You're greeted by his family's 3 generations lounging in loose, comfortable robes, sipping something herbal from clay cups. There's a child sketching birds in the dust with a date pit, a grandmother humming to herself as she fans rose petals across a low marble table, and a woman your age who raises an eyebrow, clearly amused by your look of baffled relief. You sit down, cross-legged on a woven mat, and they offer you a small plate of sweet melon slices. Somehow, the fruit is chilled. You hesitate. Where's the fridge? They don't have electricity. And yet this room feels like early spring. The walls are thicker than you expected, maybe 4 feet deep. They absorb the heat during the day and hold on to the cool of night like an ancient secret. The ceilings are high, vaulting upward like inverted wells, and they seem to inhale and exhale with each subtle shift of wind. Then you finally notice it. The massive vertical shaft built right into the center of the room mesh ceiling. It's open to the sky, but cleverly angled. The slightest desert breeze seems to slip into the tower, then cascade downward into the home like water pouring through an invisible funnel. And it's not just one. You spot at least 3 more of these strange towers poking up from other parts of the roof, each positioned to catch a different current. Wind catchers, your host says, seeing your gaze follow the shafts. We call them badge. You glance back toward the door you entered through. No draft, no fan, no trick. Just this elegant, ancient chimney-like tower, gently delivering cool air to every corner of the home. Historians still argue whether these homes were designed with instinct or with the precision of deep understanding, but in this moment, it doesn't really matter. You're sitting in a house built centuries ago, in one of the hottest climates on Earth, and for the first time all day, you're actually comfortable. Now that's hospitality. You tilt your head back and really look at it, that strange chimney thing rising above the ceiling. Its rectangular slits, catching slices of sunlight as they funneled the breeze downward like a silent orchestra conductor. The bajir doesn't hum or rattle like an air conditioner. It doesn't hiss like a vent. It just whispers. It feels alive, like it's gently breathing on your neck. The cool air it delivers isn't Arctic, it's subtle, like the inside of a cave that's never seen the sun. You step outside for a better look, climbing narrow stairs that twist around the side of the house until you reach the flat, dusty rooftop. There they are, 4 of them, standing like ancient sentinels. Each bajir is tall and boxy, made of mud brick with vertical slits on every side, a bit like open windows with no glass. They're symmetrical, carefully placed, and clearly not just decorative. The tallest one faces the western sky, angled toward the dry evening wind known locally as the Badisad, or cold wind. This one is your host, pride enjoy it, catches the strongest breeze and sends it spiraling down through the shaft into the center of the house. You peer inside, expecting to see fans, or ropes, or maybe a trained hawk flapping in circles. But no, just darkness, and a faint sound like wind caressing the throat of a flute. And then you notice something odd. Some badgers have open slits on only one side, others have them on all 4. A few are capped with dome-like covers that look suspiciously like hats. You ask about this, and your host's son, grinning, explains, depends on the season and the mood of the wind. Turns out, these towers aren't passive features, they're part of an ongoing conversation with nature. Their design reflects not just structural logic, but an ancient dialogue with the desert climate. You learn that some wind catchers are designed to bring cool air down, while others are shaped to pull hot air up and out, acting like giant exhaust pipes. The tower knows what to do based on which side the wind is coming from. It's a weather whisperer in brick form. Historians still debate whether early builders fully understood fluid dynamics or simply observed what worked and refined it generation after generation. But one thing is certain. This wasn't guesswork. The whole system is intentional, clever, and oddly poetic. You rest your hand against the side of the tower, and even the bricks feel cooler up here, like they're part of a quiet conspiracy against the sun. Down below, you hear someone laughing. Dinner must be ready. As you head back toward the stairs, the breeze from the tower tickles your arm again, an ancient Persian high five for paying attention. Back downstairs, you settle again on the cool tile floor, trying to piece it all together. How did people, thousands of years ago, in the middle of a sun-scorched desert, figure out how to chill an entire house using nothing but mud, water, wind, and intuition? Your host chuckles, watching you stare at the ceiling like it holds answers. Nature speaks. He says, you just have to listen longer than your thirst. It sounds poetic because it is, but it's also engineering, baked slowly over centuries by people who observed the world with stubborn patience. You learn that long before the word aerodynamics ever entered the chat. Ancient Persians were studying wind like it was their neighbor's gossip. They noticed that when you open 2 windows on opposite sides of a room, the air flows differently depending on the time of day, the heat, and whether the walls have had time to bake. They saw how birds cooled themselves by fluffing feathers and facing the breeze. They realized caves stay cool, even in summer, and they watched how hot air rises just like their tempers if left without a place to escape. The earliest wind towers were probably just vertical holes in roofs, meant to let smoke out and night air in. Over generations, those holes became smarter, redirecting air based on angle, height, and even the changing seasons. The result, a passive cooling system that works 24/7, doesn't require electricity, and never breaks down unless you count the occasional pigeon squatter. What's wild is that they did this without thermometers, pressure gauges, or fancy architectural software. They had intuition, they had trial and error, and, most importantly, they had clay, lots and lots of sun-dried clay. Some modern scholars still debate whether these builders understood Bernoulli's principle or simply got lucky. But honestly, when you walk into a home like this, on a 46°C day and feel a breeze on your ankles, luck doesn't seem like a strong enough explanation. You lean your head back against the wall. It's cool, smooth, and slightly damp, from the residual moisture the structure holds from the previous night's air. You realize this isn't just architecture, it's climate empathy. Every corner, every vent, every shady corridor was crafted to listen to the land, not conquer it. And in a world that often forgets how to slow down, there's something quietly rebellious about that. You yawn, lulled by the stillness, by the rhythmic pulse of air slipping through the and by the undeniable charm of ancient people being just smart enough to outwit the sun without ever saying a word.
You decide to step outside again because hey, how bad can it really be? You're curious. Maybe all this fuss about wind catchers is exaggerated. So you push open the wooden door, blink against the light, and immediately regret your optimism. The sun slams into your face like an oven door flung wide open. The street is the same one you walked through earlier, but now it feels like a punishment. The ground seems to shimmer with waves of heat, and your sandals don't quite shield you from the warmth radiating upward. A few brave cats lounge in the shadow of a cart, but even they look irritated. You take 2 steps out of the shaded doorway, and it hits you. Your shirt starts to cling, your hair feels heavy, and the back of your neck turns into a tiny, portable frying pan. This, you realize, is why the wind tower exists. Not for comfort, for survival. The heat here isn't just uncomfortable, it's strategic. It waits. It tests your resolve. Historical records note that summer temperatures in places like Yazd regularly exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, with barely a hint of rain for months. The wind, when it did blow, felt more like the inside of a dragon's mouth than a breeze. And yet, life thrived here. Families didn't just endure, they designed their homes to adapt, not fight. You shuffle back into the doorway, barely 5 minutes into your adventure, already dreaming of the cool interior. As you lean against the doorframe, catching your breath, a passing merchant yells out a joke about foreigners melting in minutes. You smile politely while your knees plot mutiny. It makes sense now why homes were designed with multiple courtyards, deep walls, and that brilliant, whispering tower above. These weren't luxury features, they were thermal lifeboats. You notice a narrow water channel running through the edge of the alley, dry now, but clearly once fed by a hidden aqueduct. Even small flows of water were used to cool the air and lower the ground temperature. Historians still debate whether the urban layout of ancient Persian cities was designed specifically for airflow, or if the maze-like alleys simply evolved that way. Either way, the effect is the same: shadow, breeze, and tiny temperature miracles in the midst of a furnace. You duck back inside, heart thudding slightly faster, and are greeted once again by that slow-moving breath of cool air drifting down the tower. It feels earned this time, as if the house approves of your brief attempt to understand. The Sunandan welcomes you back with a whisper that says, "Told you so."
You're sitting again on that wonderfully cool mat, the same spot where the breeze tickles your skin, just enough to make you forget the outside world exists. Your host pours you a second cup of hot tea in the desert, because irony is timeless, and starts to explain something that sounds almost poetic. The wind, he says, has names, not just direction or speed. In this part of Iran, wind isn't a thing, it's a character in the story of daily life. There's the shamal, the northern wind, often dry and impatient. There's the Badi Saba, a gentle morning breeze loved by poets and bakers alike. And the dreaded Gamsa, which, if it had a voice, would definitely yell. You sip your tea and learn that in ancient Persia, people didn't just react to the wind. They observed it, recorded it, respected it. They built towers and homes based on what kind of wind they were courting. One breeze cools the house. Another, if captured wrong, might send us storming into your date cakes. Even the opening and closing of windows was a sort of choreography. Some families kept records of wind patterns the way others tracked family trees. Historians still debate how formalized this system really was, whether it was written science or inherited intuition, but either way, the positioning of a wind tower wasn't random. Each bajir is like a musical instrument, tuned to catch the right note from the sky. Your host pulls out an old map showing the layout of the neighborhood. You notice the homes aren't aligned in neat rows, they tilt slightly, staggered like dancers in a slow-motion waltz. It's all designed around how the wind behaves during different times of year. You think about your own apartment back home, and how it blasts hot air through the vents in July. No matter what setting you choose, here, the wind itself is the thermostat. The people who live with it aren't fighting it. They're having tea with it. You glance up again, at the tower's vent. The breeze coming through smells faintly of dust, sun, and something floral like jasmine that's been dreaming. You close your eyes and listen. The wind speaks, and now, you almost understand a word or two. The next morning, just after sunrise, your host nudges you awake with a grin and a handful of warm "Time to build," he says, as if it's a normal part of your holiday itinerary. You blink, yawn, and follow him out to a nearby lot where a crew of masons, barefoot and cheerful, they're restoring an old bajir, and apparently, today you're the newest unpaid apprentice. The sun is kind for now, casting long shadows across the dusty yard as buckets of clay and straw are stirred into a thick, gloppy paste. You're handed a trowel and a chunk of mud brick, which somehow weighs more than your backpack but less than your dignity. You join the line and pass bricks upward as a team of men perch on makeshift scaffolding, arranging the pieces like a giant game of Tetris with no undo button. It's slow, deliberate work. Every brick must fit snugly, every angle precise. These towers may look like simple chimneys, but their structure is anything but casual. The shaft needs to be tall enough to pull air down, but narrow enough to keep the airflow focused. And the top, that part, is sculpted to face the wind, just so like adjusting a sail on a ship that never moves. Historians still argue whether these masons worked from standardized blueprints, or if the knowledge was passed down through hands and muscle memory alone. Either way, you're starting to understand the reverence. The master mason smears a layer of wet clay with a sweep of his palm, and taps it twice his version of a blessing. The bricks themselves are sun-dried, not kiln-fired, which makes them more breathable. That's right. The walls breathe, they absorb moisture, release heat slowly, and sound hollow if you knock on them with just the right knuckle. You wipe sweat from your brow, and realize you've been working for 2 hours. You read, not even halfway up the base of the tower. One of the workers hands you a slice of chilled melon, and you wonder where it was stored. He points to a shaded basin lined with tiles, filled with water and damp cloth. Medieval refrigerator hiding in plain sight. You climb a few rungs up the scaffolding, peer down into the developing shaft, and suddenly feel the early breeze flowing up at you. Like the tower is already learning how to breathe again. You get goosebumps, partly from the wind, partly from wonder. You're not just building a chimney, you're building a conversation with the sky. You sit in the shade afterward, toes caked in dust, a watermelon seed stuck to your elbow, and a faint breeze brushing across your sore shoulders. Your brain is still trying to make sense of it all. How does this work really work? You turn to your host's nephew, Billy, 13, and already smarter than most weather apps. He grabs a stick and draws lines in the sand like a tiny desert professor. Hot air is us, he says with a shrug, as if it's the simplest truth in the world. And technically, he's right. You watch as he sketches a crude house. One arrow pointing up from a heated room. One arrow dipping down through the windcatcher shaft. You begin to get it. The magic of the Bajir isn't magic at all, it's physics. Dressed in mud. As the hot air inside the home rises, it escapes through one of the tower's vents. This escaping air creates negative pressure inside, which sucks cooler air in through other vents, usually ones catching a passing breeze. The taller the tower, the stronger the draft. And if there's no wind outside, doesn't matter. The temperature difference alone keeps the cycle flowing. Add a pool of water or a damp cloth inside the shaft, and now the air cools further through evaporation. You nod slowly, sipping cold mint tea, your fingers tracing the edge of your clay cup. The entire system is passive, no engines, no wires, no buzzing sounds to interrupt the silence of afternoon prayer. And it just keeps working. You don't need to adjust settings. The house adjusts itself. Historians still argue whether this method originated in Persia or developed simultaneously in Egypt or India. But there's little doubt the Persians perfected it. You remember that moment you stood under the tower yesterday, feeling the breeze descend like the breath of a giant cat, soft and steady. It's all thanks to temperature, pressure, and air density, all wrapped up in the kinda humble, poetic logic your science teacher would be loved, but your air conditioner sales rep probably wouldn't. You think about your apartment again, how it whines and wheezes and still can get the temperature right unless you babysit the thermostat. And here you are, in a house built centuries ago, enjoying air that's naturally regulated and smells vaguely of basil and baked clay. You lean back, eyes half closed, and listen to the wind drift through the Bajir again. It's not loud, but it speaks in rhythm. Hot air rises, cool air flows, and you just sit still and enjoy the miracle. Later that afternoon, you wander through the older part of town with your host's cousin, a wiry man who walks like he's late to something but never actually is. He gestures toward rooftops as you pass some flat, some dumb, some stacked high like miniature castles, and every few blocks, a new wind tower rises above the skyline like a proud, silent flagpole. But not all badgers are created equal. Some are squat and plain, others stand tall with ornate brickwork, blue tile inlays, and elegant arches shaped like frozen flames. One even has a miniature dome perched on top, like a tiny crown showing off in the desert sun. You pause and point upward. Why so fancy, you ask? Your guide smirks. That one belonged to a merchant who sold raisins, had 5 daughters. He wanted the tower to look taller than his neighbors. Ah, yes, the age-old game of rooftop rivalry. Turns out, badgers weren't just cooling devices, they were status symbols. The taller your tower, the more wind you caught, and the more impressed your guests would be. They were architectural flexes, the ancient Persian equivalent of airbrushed car hoods or Instagram-worthy garden fountains. Historians still argue whether these design flourishes actually improved airflow, or were just the result of wealthy egos colliding with mud. Some believe the extra height allowed homes to trap high-altitude breezes. Others think they just made good conversation starters over evening tea. You walk past one that looks like a miniature ziggurat, 7 tiers of decorative bricks spiraling upward like a wedding cake. Another tower has delicate wooden shutters on each side, carved with floral patterns and tiny stars. That family, your guide says, wanted wind and privacy, so they built filters. You nod, realizing that even in a desert, style and comfort were never mutually exclusive. You turn a corner and come face to face with the grandest wind tower yet, rectangular, and flanked by 2 smaller towers that seem to orbit it like loyal satellites. A group of neighborhood kids are using the shade it casts as a soccer goal. You stand under it, gazing up as the late afternoon sun edges behind its frame. Even from below, you can feel it pulling air downward like a lazy inhale. And for a second, you wonder if the real reason these towers became so grand wasn't just about status but about legacy. Building something taller than your neighbor is one thing. Building something the wind itself remembers, that's a different kind of victory. By the time the sun begins to dip and paint the city in amber, your host beckons you into the coolest room yet. It's hidden down a narrow hallway, behind a thick wooden door you hadn't noticed before. The air changes instantly as you step in. It's not just cooler, it's fresh, like the inside of a stone well after rain. You feel it on your skin, on your arms, even behind your ears. You breathe in deeply and catch the faint scent of damp earth and something else. Mint. Whatever it is. It's glorious. This is the Sard, your host explains. A cold chamber, a retreat from the hottest days, and a place for the most delicate items, cooled drinks, pickled vegetables. And now, you spot a shallow pool in the center, tiled in faded blue and white patterns. A gentle ripple moves across its surface, not from your footsteps, but from the breeze descending the wind tower and skimming across the water. This, you learn, is where the Bajir really shines. When air moves across water, the moisture evaporates, taking heat with it. It's evaporative cooling, a technique used in ancient Persia, long before electricity was a twinkle in Edison's eye. You dip your fingers in the pool, refreshingly cold, and follow the current of air with your eyes. It flows through a narrow duct built at floor level, curves around the edge of the room, and disappears through another shaft. It's not just one tower doing this, it's a full system. Air comes in from one side, crosses the pool, cools down, and then exits somewhere else, taking the heat with it like a polite guest who clears your dishes. Historians still debate whether these multi-vent systems were calculated or evolved naturally through centuries of household tweaks. Some claim architects used primitive airflow models. Others suggest housewives figured it out through intuition and nagging. Either way, it works. In fact, you're starting to wonder if you'll ever be this comfortable again. You sit by the pool, watching dust motes float lazily in a golden beam of light. It's completely silent, save for the quiet slosh of water and the soft sigh of wind. The walls curve inward slightly, keeping sound muffled and light gentle. It's like being inside a clay lullaby. No buzz, just air, water, and old stone doing their job with quiet excellence. And for a moment, you forget it's the 21st century. You forget the heat. You forget yourself. You're just cooled. Naturally. Later that evening, after a light dinner of lentils, yogurt, and sweet dates, the youngest son of the household, a bright-eyed kid no taller than your waist, tugs at your sleeve. With the confidence of someone about to reveal treasure. "Follow me," he whispers, and without waiting, darts off through an archway near the garden. You glance at your host, who simply shrugs and waves you on. The boy leads you to a narrow stone staircase that curves downward into the earth, the light fading with each step until you're surrounded by cool, damp darkness. The temperature drops so quickly, it feels like stepping into a forgotten century. You emerge into a tunnel that smells like cold rock and ancient dust. The walls are smooth, slightly damp, and your footsteps echo faintly as you follow the child deeper into the labyrinth. This, he tells you, is a Connaught corridor, at least part of the network that surrounds it. Not every home has direct access, but his family, being old merchants, had this one dug generations ago. It's part of a much larger system, underground water channels that bring life to cities like Yazd. Here, it also brings relief. The tunnel isn't just a passage for water, it's a conduit for air. The deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't just about plumbing, it's part of the entire house's cooling strategy. The walls absorb the chill of the earth and hold on to it, like a subterranean memory. The air down here flows slowly, like it's in no rush. You reach a small chamber, with a low ceiling, and a narrow bench carved directly from the stone. The boy sits and motions for you to do the same. Above your heads is a small vertical slitter shaft leading up to the home. This is where cool underground air meets the tower's current, forming a lazy loop that keeps the air moving without ever needing a push. Some historians still debate whether these connections between Canuts and Badgers were designed all at once, or gradually discovered through use. What's clear is that this tunnel is no accident. You run your fingers along the stone, cool and rough beneath your hand, and imagine the centuries of sandals and shadows that passed through here before you. Even in the dark, it feels comforting, protective, as if the earth itself wants you to rest. You glance at the boy, who's now humming a song that echoes softly through the tunnel, and just like that, the history lesson fades into a lullaby. Back above ground, just as the stars begin to bloom across the desert sky, your host invites you to sit on the edge of the courtyard fountain. He traces a finger along the water's surface and says softly, "Without the Canut, we'd have no wind towers, no gardens, no tea." You nod slowly, the meaning unfolding like a scroll. Earlier, you followed one narrow tunnel, but the truth is much bigger. The Canut is not just a well or a ditch, it's a miracle of geometry and persistence. It starts far outside the city, where distant mountains trap winter snow and spring rain. That water seeps into the earth, sinks into gravel layers, and centuries ago, clever Persians learned to tap into it. They dug vertical shafts one after another, spaced like footsteps of giants connected by gently sloped underground tunnels that led the water down, across miles of parched land, straight to the cities and homes below, all without pumps, no motors, just gravity, patience, and a serious understanding of slopes. You picture it. Teams of diggers working in unbearable heat, carving out a precise slope of 1 to 2 meters per kilometer, so the water would flow neither rushing too fast nor stopping in a puddle. It was math you could drink. Historians still argue whether this technique began in Persia or spread here from Mesopotamia, but most agree that Iran elevated the practice into an art form. Some Canuts stretch for over 50 kilometers underground, hidden rivers sustaining entire communities in the middle of nowhere. Your host tells you how, growing up, they'd lower a ceramic jar on a rope into the access shaft to get fresh, cold water, no plastic, no plumbing, just the earth offering up its kindness. And what's more, these Canuts feed not just the homes but the sods. The airflow moving through a badger becomes much cooler when it passes over Canut-fed pools or moist tiles. The whole system, above and below, works like a slow, ancient machine. It's not just functional, it's beautiful. You begin to realize how the Bashir and the Canut are like two old friends, one catching wind, the other carrying water around together. They create comfort in a land that should, by all logic, be unlivable. The night air settles softly around you. Somewhere nearby, a candle flickers behind a curtain. You lean back and let the wind kiss your cheek again, this time carrying a whisper of mountain water from beneath your feet. The sky is darker now, dotted with stars that feel unusually close, like you could pluck one down if you stood on tiptoe. Inside the house, your host is moving quietly, closing wooden shutters and sealing off a few narrow vents high on the walls. You raise an eyebrow, curious. "To keep the night," he murmurs, as though he's bottling moonlight. And in a way, he is. During the scorching daytime, badgers draw hot air upward and out, pulling cooler breezes in. But at night, especially after a cloudless sky bleeds the desert heat away, those same towers become tools for preserving the coolness they've earned. You'll follow him room to room as he adjusts small wooden panels inside the shafts, effectively sealing off the tower's top. The result, the chilled air that settled in during the night now lingers into the following day, trapped inside thick walls like a treasured secret. Historians still debate whether this practice, manually sealing wind catchers at nights, was a formal tradition, or just something intuitive, passed from generation to generation like a bedtime routine. Either way, the logic is sound. The home becomes a clay thermos, sipping gently from the night's cooler temperatures all the way through morning. It's not just smart, it's patient. Your host finishes his quiet work and gives a satisfied nod. No big switches flipped, no buttons pressed, just slow, thoughtful gestures adjusting the house like tuning an instrument. He left marveling at how these ancient homes didn't just respond to temperature. They anticipated it, like they had a sense of time, of rhythm. The air now feels heavier, still cool, but more still, like a held breath. The walls no longer give off warmth, they radiate calm. You lie back on a woven mat in the corner of the main room, the ceiling high above, barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the wind tower's vents. The breeze has calmed now, gentler than ever, and you realize that the house isn't just cooling itself, it's preparing to sleep. You smile at the idea. A home with bedtime rituals. You pull a light blanket over your legs, and the thought drifts with you into the silence. In the desert, even wind needs to rest sometimes. The next morning, after another night of absurdly good sleep in a building made of dust and dreams, you wake to the faint scratching of claws overhead. Curious, you follow the sound up to the rooftop with a small clay bowl of honeyed dates in hand. A pigeon watches you from the rim of a brazier, its head tilting like it's judging your outfit. You laugh under your breath and sit on the warm clay, gazing into the slatted openings of the wind catcher. It's quiet up here, peaceful but not exactly lifeless. Wind towers are remarkable, yes, but they're also basically open invitations to the insect and bird communities. You ask your host later how they manage it. He just grins. We have ways. Turns out, the ancients thought of that. 2. Builders used fine mesh, screens woven reeds, or layers of ceramic grating inside the vents to discourage unwanted guests. And the inside of many towers included angled brickwork or ledges that disrupted airflow, just enough to keep birds from nesting too comfortably. Occasionally you'll even find a bit of pottery embedded into the shaft wall, functioning as a makeshift perch for someone to climb up and clean it. Yes, wind towers need maintenance, and no, it's not glamorous. The family has stories of brave uncles and slightly annoyed teenagers who would shimmy into the shafts with damp cloths and long sticks to dislodge leaves, feathers, or the occasional very confused lizard. Historians still debate whether maintenance workers had official titles or were just the tallest kid in the house. In any case, the upkeep was real but light compared to anything mechanical. And there were bonuses. One story your host shares involves a trapped nightingale and 3 days of mystery music echoing through the home like a personal concert from the wind. The family still talks about it. As you snack on another date, you realize that these towers aren't sterile inventions. They're living parts of the house. Sometimes quiet, sometimes messy, always present. A little dust gathers on your sleeve from the breeze. You wipe it off, only to have more settle a moment later. The brazier has its own personality. Not always perfectly clean, not always convenient, but deeply, stubbornly loyal. You lean back against the wall, the sunlight warming your shoulders now as the tower whispers softly beside you. And for a few minutes, you just sit there listening to the wind, the pigeons, and a very faint hum that might just be a cricket tuning up for the evening. Later that day, your host brings out a small brass bowl and a glass vial filled with rosewater. Watch, he says, pouring just a few drops into the palm of his hand, and dabbing them gently along the edge of the wind shaft's interior. The moment the next breeze passes through, you smell its soft sweet, like a memory wrapped in silk. The air now carries a whisper of roses, transforming the room into something that feels sacred. You take a deep breath and feel, for the first time, that a home can smell like kindness. You're surprised. You didn't expect scent to be part of the cooling process, but apparently, it was a cherished tradition. In homes like this, especially those belonging to poets, scholars, or the subtly dramatic wind was sometimes scented orange blossom, even saffron. On special occasions, the air became a messenger of mood. You ask if it makes the house feel cooler or just more poetic. Both. He smiles. Historians still debate how widespread the practice was. Some call it an indulgence of the elite. Others say even modest homes kept a tiny vial of rosewater near the main tower. Either way, it reflects how the ancient Persians saw their homes, not just as shelters, but as experiences. The wind wasn't only practical, it was emotional, spiritual. Even, you walk through the home again, this time with new awareness. A faint trail of rose scent follows you, curling softly around the arches, whispering through the high ceilings. In the kitchen, someone is grinding dried mint. A waft of that joins the rose. It's like walking through a quiet, invisible garden that changes with every room. Even the cats seem calmer. And the funniest thing, this little trick also helps keep flies away. A fringe benefit. You can almost hear the sarcasm in your hostess' voice as he tells you, "We perfume the wind and keep the bugs confused." It's an old house, in a hot city, built from materials that crumble in heavy rain, and yet, someone thought, What if the breeze could smell like a dream? You press your palm against the wall near the vent and feel it cool beneath your skin. Not cold never, cold but gentle. The kind of air that doesn't just touch you, it welcomes you. You sit by the tower for a long time, eyes closed, surrounded by the scent of rose and dust and old stone. You're not just breathing air anymore, you're breathing history. That evening, your host invites you up to the roof again, where a low breeze flutters the corner of a woven rug, and the stars begin to flicker awake. He gestures across the skyline of Yazd, and you see it now dozens, maybe hundreds, of wind towers rising in quiet symmetry across the city, like chimneys from a forgotten fairy tale. Each bajir hums its own soft rhythm, catching the night air, some still standing proudly straight, others slightly leaning like old men with secrets. It's a city breathing through brick. He pours 2 small cups of cardamom tea and sets them between you, careful not to spill a drop. You sit side by side, watching the city move at the speed of thought. Here, speed is slow, deliberate, kind. Your host begins to speak of ancestors, those who built the first towers here, who taught their sons to shape clay and their daughters to read the wind. The badgers weren't just tools, he explains. They were memories, embedded in architecture. You see that one? He says, pointing to a tower trimmed in green tile. My grandfather built it during a drought. He added the extra vents so the house could catch more night air. You ask if it worked. He laughs. Well, the house was cool, but my grandmother still refused to cook inside. Some things, it seems, even engineering can't solve. Historians still discuss whether wind towers were always attached to private homes, or if early public buildings had them first: mosques, schools, baths. There's evidence for both. What matters now is that the tradition lasted, even in a time of concrete and compressors. Some families still choose to restore their badgers rather than replace them. You sip your tea and taste steam and spice and something earthy, maybe even slightly floral. Like everything here carries a ghost of the last wind that passed through. You lie back on a rolled-up cushion, the tower beside you slicing a gentle draft across your ankles. It's cooler than it should be. Not cold. Persian architecture never tries to shock the body, it eases it. And in that still moment between tea and breath, you realize you're not just looking at history, you're sitting inside it, wrapped in its breeze, listening to it whisper as it moves on. As morning filters in once again, casting pale gold across the mud brick walls, your host offers you a final tour, a kind of farewell loop through the home before you go. But this time, you walk alone. Each step is familiar now. You know where the floor creaks slightly. You recognize the cool pocket of air in the hallway just before the sitting room. And when you pass beneath the central wind tower, you instinctively glance upward, already expecting that hush of moving air. It's still there, always there. A presence more than a sound. You visit the kitchen first, where sunlight falls through a lattice screen in stripes, warming the tile without overheating the space. The window vent above the stove is half open, angled just right to coax warm air upward and out. The stack of ceramic jars in the corner, isn't just quaintly replaced, where the breeze will gently pass over them, helping to preserve whatever's inside. You remember your host explaining that even food storage respected airflow. Next, the sod. You descend slowly now, feeling the air cool, degree by degree as you pass through each shaded layer. The water in the basin still ripples gently, kissed by the invisible breath of the tower. You crouch down and listen. It's not just the wind you hear, it's the house thinking, adjusting, remembering how to keep its people comfortable. Historians still debate how much of these cooling systems were taught through formal apprenticeship versus daily living, but you suspect the answer is no one just used a Persian home, they lived with it. The house was an active participant in survival. You step back up into the courtyard, letting your fingers brush the rough plaster wall. The scent of dried rose petals lingers faintly. In the corner, a cat stretches under the edge of a bajira's shadow. You look up again at the tower that started it all square, quiet, brilliant. Your host appears behind you with a basket of dried herbs. Take this, he says, pressing it into your hands. So when your wind is bad, you remember how to fix it. You smile, unsure whether he means real wind or something else entirely. Either way, it lands. You step outside. The alley is warm already, but it doesn't feel hostile anymore. You've been trained gently, subtly to listen to the breeze, to follow shade like a map, and to never underestimate the power of mud, water, and patience. And somewhere behind you, the bajia sighs again, as if saying, come back when you forget how to breathe. Days later, Back in your own apartment, the hum of your air conditioner feels strangely loud. The air is cold, yes, but sterile. You sit by the window and crack it open, hoping for a breeze. But all that wafts in is a half-hearted gust that smells like concrete and car tires. You lean your head against the sill, close your eyes, and try to recall that quiet hiss of wind, sliding through the tower's throat the way it spoke rather than blew. You miss it, desperately. That slow, thoughtful breath of architecture. The way each corner of the Persian home had a temperature, a tone, a mood. Your AC is efficient, sure, but it doesn't think. It doesn't shift with the sun or remember the coolness of last night. It just buzzes, coughs, and demands electricity. You remember how the walls of that ancient house held on to coolness, like a promise, and how the breeze changed depending on where you stood, sweeping in through the main hall, coasting over damp tiles, then curling up the wall and vanishing into a vent like a cat with better places to be. Historians still argue whether the emotional bond people had with their homes back then was spiritual or just practical. That house cared for you. It was unti. Perfect. It had dust and quirks and lizards, but it cradled your body in a kind of passive grace no machine can offer. You grabbed the little bundle of herbs your host gave you, Nell, slightly dry, slightly crushed. You hold it close and inhale. It's faint, but it's there. The desert, the rosewater, the clay, the memory of comfort built by hand. You light a candle, turn off your AC, and for the first time since returning, you really listen. There's a breeze, just barely. A whisper sneaking past the edge of your window. You pull a chair closer and sit beside it, pretending just for a moment that you're home again. That there's a Bashir above you, reading the sky. That somewhere in the walls, the house is still breathing. As your days go on, the memory doesn't fade, it deepens. Like the way the scent of old books lingers long after the pages stop turning. You begin noticing things you never cared about before. How your building traps heat during the day, how the stairwell always feels cooler than your living room. How the sun falls against one wall more gently in the morning than the afternoon. You start thinking in air. You rearrange a few things, move your chair closer to a window you never opened much. Prop. Open a kitchen door at a certain angle. Fold a towel and place it just inside the windowsill. Dampen slightly with water. It's not revolutionary, but it's something. The room feels different, even if only by a few degrees. You're not recreating a wind tower, not exactly, but you're starting to think like one. You read more about look at diagrams. Some have single openings. Others have 4, each facing a cardinal direction, tuned like instruments to the moods of the wind. Some are tall and narrow, designed to draw air down like a whispering column. Others are wider, their inner walls smoothed with lime plaster to help guide airflow like silk along stone. Historians still debate whether these different styles evolved regionally or were just preferences passed down through families. But every variation seems to say the same thing. Slow down, pay attention, and don't fight the climate dance with it. You start to notice how even your apartment's floors, those annoying drafts, that hot patch by the window, the weirdly chilly hallway can be turned into assets if you stop trying to control everything and instead begin to understand it. That's what badgers did. They didn't conquer nature. They listened to it, and then they quietly, patiently, built homes around its breath. You lean against the doorframe one evening, eyes closed, waiting for the city breeze to find you. And when it finally brushes your cheek, you smile not because it's cold, but because it remembers. One quiet evening, you find yourself sketching the shape of a wind tower on a napkin just while sipping tea near your barely open window. A tall rectangle, a few angled vents, some delicate lines for airflow. You laugh a little, realizing your doodles have turned architectural. The desert lives rent-free in your mind now. You start to understand that the Bashir was anti. It represented patience, thoughtfulness, adaptation, and maybe a little stubborn beauty too. You remember how the homes you visited in Yaz, each tower was tailored to its location, its orientation, its nearby alleys, its water access, even the temperament of its owners. Some families liked a stronger breeze. Others preferred subtle drafts and silence. Even the height of interior doorways was calibrated to encourage airflow between rooms while preserving privacy. Historians still debate whether these design decisions came from oral knowledge passed through masons, or if there were written manuals lost to time. But either way, the genius is obvious. You pause, glancing at your napkin sketch, and wonder, what would a wind tower look like for your home? Where would the vent go? Which breeze would it catch? It's a silly thought. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe what you're craving isn't a structure, but a rhythm. A softer kind of presence. The idea that your home could actually care about how you feel. Not in the high-tech sense of smart thermostats and motion sensors, but in the old way, in the way a wall remembers the sun and angled itself with respect. In the way air slips quietly around corners instead of blasting from a grate. You set the napkin down and walk through your apartment slowly, noting the cool spots, the warm ones, the still ones. You open a hallway door that you normally keep shut, and just like that, the airflow shifts. It's not dramatic, but it feels better, lighter, less stale. You sit back down by the window and let the breeze brush against your fingertips, wondering what it might say if only you'd listen a little longer. The next weekend, you find yourself browsing old architecture blogs, not because you're looking to renovate, but because the idea of buildings that breathe won't leave you alone. You read about passive cooling methods, about thermal mass and crossvent, about how wind catchers were sometimes paired with underground water reservoirs to create full-on desert air conditioners, centuries before electricity. You come across an old photograph slightly faded of a lone Bajir, standing tall over a crumbling home, surrounded by dry hills and clouds of dust. And you'd feel something like home for a place that wasn't technically yours. You remember how each tower you saw had a different character. Some straight-backed and proud, others leaning slightly, like they'd been listening to the wind for too long. One had a crack down the middle, patched with new clay by someone who clearly loved it enough not to let it fall. Historians still argue whether these structures were considered sacred, or merely domestic. But the reverence they inspired felt real, like how people speak about trees that shelter their homes, or wells that never ran dry. You scrolled further and read about modern attempts to revive the Bajajaniers installing similar passive systems in new buildings, experimenting with old designs in modern cities where concrete walls baked like ovens and to see us fight uphill battles. There's hope in that. A kind of circular wisdom that the future might still listen to the past. You close your laptop and look around your own space. It suddenly feels louder, somehow more cluttered with sound and static air, but also more full of possibility. You stand and open every window in your place, even the ones that usually stick. The air begins to move, sluggish at first, then curious. You grab a small dish, pour water in, and place it by the open sill. A nod to the old ways, and when the air brushes past your face barely a breeze, really you close your eyes and smile. The tower may not be there, but the wind still remembers how to find you. A few weeks later, during a walk through your city's old quarter, you'd start noticing things you'd never have cared about before. An alley that always seems to stay cool, even at noon. A bakery with a strange little clay vent above the door. A public library with windows lined up just right, so the wind glides through like a sigh. You pause beneath the stone archway and feel the air shift, not by accident, but by design. Someone, long ago, planned for this. It's humbling, really. You realize that climate-aware architecture isn't limited to the deserts of Persia. It's been hiding in plain sight in the deep eaves of Japanese temples, in the open courtyards of North African homes, in the thick walls of Andalusian villas. But nowhere, perhaps, did it sing quite as clearly as in the badgers of Yazday. You find a shaded bench and sit, letting the breeze work its quiet charm. People pass you by rushed, hunched over glowing phones, earbuds jammed in, oblivious to the miracle of air that has been traveling across continents and centuries to arrive right here, brushing against their sleeves. Historians still debate how much of traditional architecture was art and how much was survival. But for you, the line is beautifully blurred. You pull out a notebook and begin sketching again, this time not a wind tower, but the path of a breeze through a neighborhood. How it bounces off stone, tucks into narrow corridors, and flows into shaded courtyards like a polite guest. You add notes in the margin. Window at angle, clay basin, wooden shutters equals adjustable vents. It's not a plan to build something, it's just ... a way of seeing, a vocabulary you've adopted. Slowly, one cool breath at a time, you close the notebook and look up at the sky, that same broad canvas under which the badgers stood. There are no towers here, no rose-scented ducks, but the air still moves. The world still breathes, and no, you breathe with it. You find yourself telling friends about it, not with fanfare but in those quiet, meandering conversations that start with weather and end in wonder. Did you know people used to cool entire houses with just clay and wind? You say over coffee, and they pause, curious. You describe the wind towers, the underground canals, the water basins that made hot air soft. At first, they smile politely, but then something shifts. They start to see it, too. You watch their brows lift, Their eyes drift sideways as they imagine their own apartments, the ones that stifle in summer and hum with machidi and UV. One friend even messages you later that week. I opened both kitchen windows at once and felt an actual breeze. What sorcery is this? You grin. The badger effect. Slow, subtle, contagious. Historians still discuss whether the success of ancient cooling systems was due to elite planning or community wisdom, whether these innovations trickled down or grew from the ground up. But what you see now is how ideas ripple. One person notices the wind, another adjusts a curtain, a third opens a door at just the right hour, and suddenly, the house joins the conversation. You'd start gifting people little things, ceramic bowls, sprigs of dried mint, postcards with hand-drawn wind tower sketches. Nothing big, just reminders, invitations to think slower, to feel air the way ancient Persians did, as a friend, not a force. You speak about it more softly now, not like a trivia fact, like a story you're still inside. And when someone asks why you're always sitting by the window these days, you just smile and say, I'm waiting for my bashir to show up. It hasn't, of course, not physically, but the truth is, it's already here, in the way you move through space, in the way you angle your blinds, in the way you breathe deeper when the wind finds your face. The tower may be old, but the lesson, evergreen. One particularly warm night, your building's power flickers off just for a moment, but long enough to silence everything. The fridge hum dies. The ceiling fan stalls. The traffic outside seems to pause mid-groan. And you oddly don't panic. You smile, because now, you know what to do. You open a window wide, crack another across the room, damp a towel and hang it by the sill. Light a single candle, not for light, but for mood. The room breathes, and so do you. It's not perfect. Nothing in the modern world truly mimics the grace of a bajor. It's enough to remind you that you are not helpless when the grid goes quiet. You sit cross-legged on the floor, a soft breeze curling around your ankles like an old friend returning unannounced. You think of Yazid, of the boy leading you into the Qanat tunnel, humming softly as if the stones themselves needed music. Historians still discuss whether Persian architecture reached its peak during the Safavid era or earlier dynasties. But you're no longer thinking in eras, you are thinking in temperatures, in softness, in silence. Your home feels different now, not just because of what you've added, but because of what you've begun not to resist. You let the heat settle in the walls without panic. You let the night air do its slow work. You start to understand that comfort doesn't always have to come in quick, refrigerated bursts. Sometimes it arrives quietly, shaped by small, thoughtful choices, like where to sit, when to close a vent, how to place a bowl of water where the breeze can sip from it. You imagine an ancient tower above your ceiling, whispering to you. You're learning, and you believe it. You lie down near the open window, the breeze stroking your cheek, the candle flickering in approval, the fan still off, but somehow, everything feels on. Weeks pass, and the rhythm continues. You're no longer just adjusting windows, you're observing the wind like a student. You start to track when the breeze arrives and from which direction. Is it stronger before dusk? Does it shift just after rain? You begin to anticipate it, leaving doors ajar a few minutes early, like setting out tea for a guest you know will arrive. And when the wind does slip in, subtle and smooth, it feels like reward, not relief. Your home, once a box of drywall and switches, now feels more like a breathing partner. You rearrange furniture without thinking, instinctively placing chairs near the airflow, plants where the light hits soft and slanted, textiles that rustle gently with the draft. You've become your own wind catcher, in a way, a human vizier. Historians still discuss whether the knowledge behind Persian cooling systems was ever formalized into guilds or left to informal networks of masons and families. But as you find yourself teaching others, just through example opening vents instead of reaching for remotes, you understand how knowledge once traveled, silently, persistently. One evening, a friend drops by and immediately notices the calm in your space. It feels cooler here, they say. Did you get a new fan? You shake your head. Just open a door, hung a damp scarf, listen to the building breathe. They don't get it yet, but they will. The bajir always begins as a whisper. You serve chilled water in a clay cup, not fancy, but it holds the cool longer. Another ancient trick. You find yourself blending eras. Not nostalgically, but practically. You haven't rejected the modern world, you've just stopped depending on it for every solution. You pause, staring at the candlelight dancing along the wall, and wonder how many generations kept cool this one up. through conquest or control, but through cooperation. You take another sip. The wind stirs the edge of the curtain, and just like that, the house exhales again. On a lazy Sunday afternoon, you decide to revisit the journal you started during your trip. Flipping through the pages, you see sketches of towers, notes on airflow, reminders scrawled in sleepy handwriting like mint plus basin equals cool draft, and ceiling vents. Why don't we use these anymore? It feels like a personal archaeology dig-itch note, a breadcrumb in the path back to that cool stone room under the Persian sun. One sketch catches your eye. A wind tower cross-section, with arrows showing the breeze descending through slanted vents, curling past a water basin, and gliding through rooms like a careful dancer. You'll remember standing in the sod watching the air ripple the pool, thinking, this was designed with love. Not just function, not just survival, love. And now, your own space. This small, modern apartment has become a quiet tribute to that idea. You've placed basil near your window, not just for scent, but for company. You've rearranged your curtains to sway just so when the wind visits, there's a bowl of water by the windowsill, not decorative, but part of the rhythm. Historians still argue over whether these elements were ritual or routine, sacred or domestic, but you no longer feel the need to label them. It's not about being ancient or modern. It's about being aware. You've started to see how built space can either fight nature or dance with it. And it chose to dance. Always. You close the journal, set it gently aside, and listen to your space. The breeze slips through the room, not cold, not loud, just present. You lie back and watch the curtain rise and fall like slow breath. The hum of traffic outside feels distant, like a dream you've woken from. There's no AC running, no fan buzzing, just air, moving the way it always has. You smile, close your eyes, and think. This is how a home says, rest now. As summer deepens, your new habits feel less like experiments and more like instinct. You've learned when to open the windows, not at midday, when the heat charges in like an angry lion, but in the early morning, when the air is still soft and willing to listen. You drape your damp cloths more strategically now. You'd stop using overhead lights so much, realizing they radiate warmth that stifles the cooler currents you're cultivating. Your space, once full of noise and artificial gusts, now hums with something quieter, older, something closer to the rhythm of the land itself. You visit the city's museum one afternoon and stumble across a model of a Persian courtyard house. You stare at the miniature Bajir, perfectly detailed, even the vents delicately carved. The label mentions Yazd. You grin. A man beside you mutters something about how primitive it looks. You say nothing. You just think, it's not primitive if it still works. Historians still debate whether wind catchers originated in Persia or spread there from elsewhere. But most agree they reached their peak in the desert cities, where sun and silence taught people patience. And now, you feel like one of them, not a builder, but a listener, a cohabitant with the wind. You return home that evening and walk slowly through your apartment, barefoot, alert to the tiniest change in temperature. That corner of the kitchen is a little warmer now. Time to shift the curtain. You crack the bathroom window slightly, knowing that even small openings can nudge airflow in the right direction. You think of all the adjustments the Persian builders made, trial by wind, correction by clay, and it makes you smile, because you're doing the same. Not perfectly, but attentively. You lie down near the window, the breeze curling against your shoulder, and realize this isn't just about architecture. It's about trust. Trusting the air to return, trusting your home to catch it, trusting yourself to wait. Outside, the wind picks up slightly. Inside, you feel it. And Jawal's quiet, still humbled, begin to breathe again. On an unusually humid night, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes every fabric feel uncooperative, you find yourself awake, not restless, but aware the usual tricks aren't working. The air is slower, heavier, less eager to move. You sit up, open a new window, and wait, and wait. Nothing stirs. For the first time in weeks, you feel the absence of the breeze like a missing friend. You think back to Yazd, to the way your host sealed the vents at night to trap the coolness, to how the Bajir was not just an opening but a manager of breath. You walk quietly through your space, making small adjustments, propping a door open a few inches, angling a mirror that once deflected sun to now bounce shadow, hanging a second damp cloth near the window. It's not dramatic, but something changes. Slowly, the air begins to move again, barely but enough. You stretch out near the flow, close your eyes, and feel the faintest whisper graze your forehead. Not cold, just kind. You smile, This is what the ancients knew. That comfort doesn't come from overpowering nature. It comes from aligning with it, bending toward it, shaping your space around it. Historians still debate whether climate-responsive architecture fell out of favor because of modern convenience, or because of colonial ideals that prioritized symmetry over sense. But here, tonight, those arguments are distant. What matters is that you've relearned something precious. Not just how to catch wind, but how to be with it. You drift off, feeling a breeze that isn't entirely real but not entirely imagined either. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's a leftover gift from the walls. Still trained in the art of listening. The room cools slowly, gently, in its own time, and somewhere deep inside the stillness, you sleep. In the days that follow, your awareness grows quieter but deeper. You no longer chase the breeze. You open your windows, not out of habit, but because the sky told you to. You touch your walls now and then, checking their warmth like an old mason might, gauging what they've absorbed and what they're ready to release. Even your routines begin to shift. You cook earlier, while the light is still gentle. You read near the western wall in the morning, where the shadow clings long. You nap on the floor instead of the couch, not because you're eccentric, but because you've discovered how stone and tile remember the night better than foam ever could. Your friends tease you. They say you've gone full desert monk. You don't mind, because you feel something. They don't nod yet. A relationship forming between you and your home. A kind of friendship, maybe even devotion. The Bajir wasn't just a vented, was a daily prayer. To listen, to adapt, to trust the invisible things that pass through us. Historians still argue whether these homes were seen as sacred spaces, or simply sensible ones. But you know now that sense and sacredness aren't opposites. They're intertwined. Every thoughtful, detailed vent, placement, water basin. You lean by the window again, and even though the wind isn't strong tonight, it comes anyway. A breath, a promise. You let it wash over your face, slow and soft. You whisper a thank you, not sure to what exactly. The house, the desert, the people who shaped air into comfort, or maybe just the wind itself, for returning. You step back from the window and leave it open. Let the breeze find its way. You have nothing to prove. You're no longer a visitor in this rhythm. You belong to it. One quiet evening, as the sun dips behind the buildings and the sky bruises into twilight, you sit alone in your room, window cracked just enough to invite the breeze without making a fuss. The air glides in, soft and barely scented, carrying with it that familiar hush of presence, the kind that says, I've arrived, but only for a moment. You don't chase it, you just let it pass through. The curtain lifts slightly, then falls again. The pages of an old book ripple, close, settle. You sit still, not needing to do anything, just be. This has become the way of things now. Subtle, rhythmic, sacred. You've stopped expecting air to obey you. Instead, you've learned how to shape space so that air wants to stay. You remember your host's words? We don't cool the house, we invite the cool. And that's what you do now. You've become an inviter of wind, of quiet, of gentler ways of being. Historians still disagree on whether the Bajir was invented once and perfected over time, or whether it emerged in many places, all at once, born from necessity and watching the sky. But you've come to believe something else entirely, that it was always meant to be found, that every hot land eventually teaches its people to listen, and that listening, over time, becomes architecture. A home becomes a haven, not through technology, but through attention. You rise slowly, place a hand on the cool tile near the door, and feel the last trace of sun stored within it. Tomorrow, it will radiate this heat back out, gently. The cycle continues. You turn off the lights, let the shadows stretch wide. The room settles into itself, the air steady and slow. There are no machines humming, no alarms ticking, just the faint sigh of a world that still knows how to breathe. You lie down. The breeze finds your face once more. And now, we slow things down. Let it all soften now. Let the imagery fade like ink in warm water. The sun has long set behind the clay walls, the towers resting quietly above a sleeping city. The wind, once eager, now hums like a lullaby, easing from room to room, no longer rushing, just staying. Imagine yourself curled on a woven mat, the stone beneath cool and steady, a basin nearby gently reflecting moonlight. You don't need to move. The home, the air, the earth, everything around you is holding still, just for you. Feel your breath, mimic the rhythm of the breeze, low, smooth, nothing forced. The Bajir above continues its quiet vigil, catching dreams instead of gusts now. filtering the sky itself into the hush of your thoughts. No effort, no tension. Let your body feel heavy in the best way, like a soft stone settled in the earth's embrace. Your toes cool, your palms warm, your chest rising and falling as the world around you lowers its voice. You are safe, you are held, and the wind will keep watch, long after you've drifted away. Sweet dreams.